I'm a snake. I'm a snake. You see my tongue? Bleh. I'm a snake. I'm a snake. Bleh.
What is going on, guys? So today we are actually, this always seems to be a pretty anticipated video for me, considering this is like my favorite aspect of the entire PvP scene, is actually coming up with teams and like building out a team. And I don't know, it's just, I've always loved it in TCGs. It's always been a favorite like hobby activity. It's just been my favorite part. So today is pretty exciting. We're actually going to be building a team for the Rainbow Cup. Now today is not so much focused on like cost savings. We did a video for the Nightmare Cup kind of late, and I always end up doing the budget videos kind of later on in the month, just because it gives me enough time to actually look at all the Pokemon, and I've done most of the deep dives by then, and I kind of have a good idea on like which ones are not only cheap but also which ones actually like put up some good numbers. So I always do those pretty late, but this month I think I'm actually going to swap that. Expect the budget video. I don't want to give an exact time frame, but expect it extremely soon, like within, I would say comfortably within 7 days. So we'll actually try to get that done like quicker this month rather than normal, so that it'll kind of give you guys some ideas on some team building with a budget in mind. Whereas this video, I don't even pay attention to how much second moves cost. I don't pay attention to what level these Pokemon have to be. I just go for it, man. We just boom. Today we're actually going to be doing a specific style of team where we have these two Pokemon that are extremely important, and their importance comes from how many actual wins they end up capturing across the entire cup. They put up really good numbers, they have a really good win percentage, and there's just really not a whole lot of reason not to use them at this point. I mean, they are amazing in their own right. So, and you wouldn't be surprised that both of those Pokemon are Quagsire and Venusaur. So Quagsire has an extremely good matchup against almost every single Pokemon in the cup, so it makes a lot of sense to be using him. Now after we just did a Politoed deep dive, I actually, like, after I got done with that, I was thinking about that and I was like, holy cow, Poliwrath could be like a budget style Quagsire. Like, a lot of people tend to not much care for Earthquake on Quagsire. They do prefer either Acid Spray or Sludge Bomb, but there's that group of people that really like Earthquake. If that's you, then Politoed with Earthquake actually would be a pretty good substitution. It's actually got a faster move in Surf than Quagsire does. It still has Mudshot. It doesn't get the stab bonuses like Quagsire would, so it does kind of like fall just a little behind in that aspect, but Quagsire and Politoed could kind of be exchanged, and that's kind of what we're going to go over here when I talk about some alternatives to some other Pokemon. So Venusaur, of course, has some amazing matchups with Frenzy Plant. A lot of people, it's kind of still up in the air whether you should run Vine Whip or Razor Leaf. I personally like Vine Whip better. I think for our scenario here, Razor Leaf is crazy good damage, and there is a case to be made where you don't even have to worry about your opponent's shields if you're using Razor Leaf, because I mean, you can just kind of put out just tons of raw damage and just eliminate shields from the equation. If that's you, Razor Leaf is probably better. Vine Whip, though, allows you to not do as much damage, but get to Frenzy Plant way faster. So Frenzy Plant is kind of the big deal for Venusaur. It does allow it to have an immense amount of damage at a decent speed, so it makes a lot of sense for you to actually consider using Venusaur, but whether you want to go with Razor Leaf or Vine Whip is just kind of up to your playstyle. I personally think that Vine Whip is a lot more comfortable for me. I do want to, even though I can output a ton of raw damage with Razor Leaf, I always feel like I'm too slow, and it messes with my mentality of, holy cow, I'm still not going to have like enough energy even after I annihilate this Pokemon. So at least with Vine Whip, I can kind of farm some energy a little bit more efficiently than I could with Razor Leaf, but either way. And then we also have access to those poison type moves, which helps up against a lot of the other grass types, and then hits a lot of other Pokemon for neutral damage in this cup. And like, Venusaur is just all around a beast. Like, it's a crazy Pokemon to like just completely just ditch if you like have one. It's kind of a no-brainer between Quagsire and Venusaur at this point. So then we actually have an interesting slot. If we can kind of understand that everyone's going to be running Quagsire and Venusaur, because let's just assume everyone knows that. So what would be a really good alternative for both Quagsire and Venusaur? Well, maybe not a like direct counter to both of them, but a confusion user actually makes a lot of sense here. And specifically, I think that Executor or Execute, if you are a madman and you want to just go for an insane amount of Stardust cost, but Executor with Confusion is an amazing tool right here, because Confusion is actually going to be able to hit Venusaur for super effective damage, and it's actually going to have Seed Bomb, which is actually going to be able to hit Quagsire for super effective damage. So something like that is an amazing tool for a third slot. And if you can almost think that that will be generally like the core of your team, and based on the other 6 Pokemon that's staring you in the face when you're in a tournament, you kind of just pick and choose out of those 3 which one's the best lead, which one's the best mid, and then because you are running Executor and Venusaur, it may not be the best idea to go in with both of those, but you can kind of play around with it. Then our next actual Pokemon here that we're going to talk about is an anti-confusion user. So we basically want an anti-psychic Pokemon. And there's some toss-up here, because the confusion user could be the Slowbro, the Slowpoke, the Slowking. It could be Execute, Executor. It could be Butterfree. It could be Venomoth. So there's kind of a few different things. It could be Celebi. There's a few different things that it could be here. So the confusion check in general needs to be able to hit Psychic for super effective damage and try to cover not only water type, not only grass type, but also the bug type. So it kind of needs to cover some stuff there. And the first one that really comes to mind is a Forretress. Forretress is going to be able to hit grass for super effective. It's going to be neutral up against bug, and it's actually going to be neutral up against the water type as well. So it seems like the most neutral setup for that, but there's kind of a problem with Forretress, is that we end up carrying a huge weakness to fire there. Which takes us into our next thing here, so coverage. Our last 2 Pokemon actually are going to be coverage Pokemon. So if we actually end up using Forretress here, we'd want to choose a Pokemon that kind of takes a reevaluation of all of our other 4 Pokemon and say, let's figure out what our big weakness is. So in this scenario, if we have Quagsire, Venusaur, let's go with Executor, and then we also have our anti-confusion as Forretress. We have 3 different Pokemon that are actually going to be weak to that fire type, so we need a really strong water type here. And I mean, it could be any water type really. As long as it has good matchups up against the fire typing, we should be pretty good. And especially, see, I've always thought like maybe if I build a team that just has an obvious weakness, like let's say I have 4 different water Pokemon. Obviously my weakness is going to be the electric typing or the grass typing, and that's going to force my opponent to immediately say, I need to lead with that Pokemon. And then I can take a step back and say, oh, wait a minute here, because I know that you're going to lead with that Pokemon, so I can in turn lead with my direct counter to them and generally have a good strat as a lead off, which is kind of cool. But anyways, so if we end up going with a water type Pokemon, I mean, we could go with anything here. Like Kingdra is a really good specialist for the water types. You could, I mean, try to save some dust. If you already have the Lapras powered up from previous cups, you could use the Lapras. The Azumarill here makes a lot of sense. You know, anything that's actually going to be a good counter up against the fire types would be a really solid choice here. So let's actually go with Azumarill for this slot. And what does that end up telling us? So we've got Quagsire and Azumarill, both weak to grass. We've got our fire kind of covered here. So it sounds like we need something that would cover the grass at this point, since that's our next biggest weakness. So sounds like we may need a fire type or something right here. So then if we take a fire type, I mean, Charizard seems to be the best one that everyone seems to be, you know, like, oh, Charizard's amazing. So you could go with Charizard. You could technically go with Typhlosion. It's a little bit more risky, but you could do that. Like I said, there are tons of options right here that you can just kind of go with and really explore, you know, what you want in your team, because there's 2 flex spots in this scenario, and that's a pretty big, broad, open selection there. As long as you take your first 4 Pokemon and you actually like sit down and think like, do I want to run? Because the problem with the Confusion user is if you run Slowbro, you're going to be weak to the electric type and the grass types there, which is carried over from Quagsire as well. So you've got 2 Pokemon that's kind of weak to the same things. Then you have the Execute side, which if you ran that, it's going to be weak to very similar things that Venusaur's weak to. Then if you run Butterfree or Venomoth, you're still kind of weak to the fire. So you kind of have to play around with what you have versus what you think you can get away with. So now let's actually look at some team compositions that I kind of came up with on the fly and just kind of threw out there to see if they stick. So first off, we have this Quagsire, Venusaur, always gonna have that combo here. Let's actually go with Slowbro for this one, which means we're going to have a weakness to electric and grass here. Since we already have the weakness to grass from Quagsire, why not also have some grass check in there too with some fire type moves? So Houndoom seemed to be really good here. If we were to run dark type moves plus run actual fire type moves, it would help against the counters that are coming after both Quagsire and Slowbro here. Then I saw, well, so Houndoom's going to be kind of weak to the water typing, whereas nothing else is really weak to it, but we still have that weakness to the grass. So let's go with Charizard. If we go with Charizard here, we're going to have a pretty big dominance up against the grass type, but that actually leaves us open to 2 different Pokemon weak to water. So what would be a good alternative to block out some water? Oh, Lantern makes a lot of sense here. If we actually ran our Charge Beam variant of Lantern, it would be really interesting because we'd also be able to hit the water types for super effective damage while hopefully resisting a ton of their damage depending on their moveset. So I definitely think that something like this is a really solid start for a lot of people. Now, of course, you don't have to have every single Pokemon. That I am in this boat where I don't think you have to have a Pokemon to do good in a cup. It really comes down to your strategy from the get-go. So if we take that concept, what can we use besides these Pokemon? Well, like I said earlier, Politoed could actually be kind of substituted for Quagsire, which I still do think is pretty good. Plus, it doesn't have as hard of a weakness to the grass types that Quagsire would, so it possibly could work out a little bit better in some scenarios. Ivysaur, I think, is a good substitute for Venusaur here. You could also go with something like Victory Bell, or if you were just completely wanting to be crazy, you could do something like Vileplume or Gloom or even Weepin' Bell here. I mean, they all kind of have their unique cases, but you basically just want something that hardcore counters that Quagsire that I do feel like everybody else is going to be bringing. Then we're actually going to go with our Executor just like we did earlier here. So we actually do start to have a big weakness to the fire types, but we need our Confusion check. And I actually have Ninetales here because Ninetales I think could be an interesting Pokemon. A lot of you guys, I understand, want to run Fire Spin. But if you were to actually run Feint Attack here, it could actually do pretty good up against the grass type Confusion users. So you'd have a dark type move straight out of the gate, plus you'd have some fire type moves straight out of the gate to help with those grass types. So you can kind of see that Houndoom and Ninetales are kind of both good at both grass and psychic type Pokemon, so it kind of makes some sense there. Whereas if it was just Slowbro, it would need some good psychic coverage, plus it would need some water coverage. So then once we take a look at these 4 Pokemon, we start to see, we're actually going to be pretty weak to the fire types here, because both Ivysaur and Executor are going to be weak to fire. So let's actually go with Kingdra, just because Kingdra is actually a really strong water specialist, especially if you're running that waterfall, you're going to be able to just tear through some fire Pokemon there. Then I got to thinking, I was like, well, what are we really weak to here? And honestly, we're not really weak to a lot. I mean, we do have a little bit of a weakness to water types here with the Ninetales on our team. We do have a little bit of weakness with electrics with our Politoed. We have a little bit of weakness to some grass, but I mean, it really could be anything at this point. And Raichu, just, I don't know, Raichu seems like he's good to be a spam type Pokemon, especially if you have the Legacy Fast move with Brick Break. It's going to be extremely freaking fast. It's going to be an extremely good counter amongst a lot of different things, and could be interesting. So that is just kind of a start for you guys. To kind of get started into team building, there are many different iterations that you can go through, and I think it highly depends on A, what you already have, and B, what you are expecting in the cup. Because if you're expecting more of the grass type confusion users, then you could definitely go with something like Houndoom or Ninetales. If you're expecting more of like the Slowbro with the water type attached to it, you could go with something like Lantern. While it's not a direct counter to the confusion type, it will actually help counter the water typing there. But there are many things that you can kind of do with this team, and you can kind of actually just break the mold altogether if you want to and just do your own thing. But that is just a quick idea of how to build a team for the Rainbow Cup. If you guys have any team built that if you guys have any teams already built that you are extremely proud of, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys are already cooking up, considering that it is coming up on the first weekend in June. It should be close to tournament time for some of you guys. So hopefully you guys are as prepared as I hope you are. Otherwise, so anyways, that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you can do that. But if you don't, you can be that guy. Otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in the comments below. And until our next video, I will catch you then.